Hello everyone, 'tis I, Sarxos. Today I'm bringing you something new that I decided to try, namely completing achievements from Europa Universalis 4 but in Victoria 2. This is an idea I came up with when I realized that quite a few EU4 achievements have requirements that could just as well be fulfilled in Vic2, so I thought it could be fun to try out. The first one I decided to do is the achievement Switzerlake, which requires you to play as Switzerland and own 99 landlocked provinces. Since both Switzerland and landlocked provinces exist in Victoria 2, this achievement is perfectly doable, but quite challenging if you want to do it efficiently. I didn't intend for this to be a speedrun per se, but I still wanted to complete it at a reasonable pace, and so I considered a number of different strategies. One strategy I attempted was to do some initial conquests in Korea and China, then hope to make use of that newfound power, along with technological superiority, to go ham and destroy the great powers of Europe head on. This didn't really work out. To be fair, I think it actually could have worked if I had been a bit less impatient, taking my time to grow my alliances and wait for the right opportunity to strike. But patience is sadly not a virtue of mine when it comes to this game. Fortunately though, fighting the great powers of Europe head-on is not actually necessary, because just like its original EU4 counterpart, this achievement does not require the 99 provinces to be connected or even located on the same continent. As such, a safer strategy is to head over to conquer uncivs in Africa and Asia instead. Since I had decided to play things safe, I took care to never exceed the infamy limit. This meant that minimizing the infamy to province count ratio was going to be key. There is one way to expand without suffering infamy at all, namely colonization, and initially I was hoping to make use of that to gain some extra territory essentially for free. Unfortunately, when you're a landlocked country that exclusively expands through colonial possessions, colonial power will be a pretty scarce resource, to say the least. I attempted to mitigate this by temporarily grabbing some coastal states to generate colonial power. I planned on getting rid of them later after I was done colonizing. But I eventually found that building up colonial power this way just wasn't efficient enough to justify wasting time and infamy on conquering coastal states that wouldn't count toward the achievement anyway. So in the end I had to rely on expanding the good old-fashioned way. I started off by getting military access to Sardinia Piedmont, and then cancelling it to exile my armies. Then I moved them over to Africa to invade Sokoto. Sokoto starts with 5 states, which is one too many for outright annexation, so in this first war I only took 1 state from them with the intention of coming back to finish off the rest later. In the meantime I marched over to Egypt to take 2 of their states as well, before continuing on to Central Asia, where I first took a chunk of Afghanistan and then annexed Kalat. With the exception of Kalat, all territory I had taken so far had been acquired via the Demand Concession war goal, which lets you take 1 state at a time for up to 5 infamy each. This is typically the most infamy efficient option for conquering uncivs in the early game. But at the same time I have been focusing my research efforts on prestige techs to ensure I would reach great power status quickly, as well as getting all the prerequisites for nationalism and imperialism, so that I could begin immediately researching it once it unlocked in 1850. Any great power that has nationalism and imperialism researched gains the ability to use the Established Protectorate war goal to annex any unciv with 4 states or fewer for just 10 infamy. Before then, Established Protectorate can only be used to annex single state uncivs, while larger ones require the considerably more expensive Conquest war goal, that costs up to 22 infamy. For that reason, I had mostly held off on fully annexing anyone prior to 1850. But with the new and improved war goals that were now available, I proceeded to devour Kokand whole and snag 2 states from Persia in the same war. Then I turned my sights back to Africa, with the intention of finishing off the rest of Sokoto and also annexing Ethiopia. The latter turned out to be more urgent than expected, as they were just in the process of taking over Eritrea from Egypt, which would have given them a coastal state, and thus they would no longer be a viable target for me. Luckily, for what is perhaps the first time ever, I was actually happy to see the great power intervention mechanic in action, as the USA had intervened on behalf of Egypt and delayed Ethiopia's untimely expansion just long enough for me to swoop in and gobble them up. Once that had been taken care of, I went over to Sokoto and annexed them as well. By now I had acquired around 3/4 of the required number of provinces, but I was also treading dangerously close to the infamy limit. I had already been forced to take extended breaks from conquest earlier in the run to allow my infamy to go down, and had even resorted to re-releasing Kalat to burn 5 infamy at once, since it only cost me 3 provinces. But at this point I was running out of good targets to conquer, since most remaining uncivs were either too small to be worth my time or had coastal states that I'm not allowed to own. There was only one notable exception left: China. When fighting China, you have access to an additional, unique war goal called Acquire Substate Region, which, as the name implies, lets you take a region from one of China's substates. It's similar to the Mon Concession in that it lets you take exactly one state and costs up to 5 infamy, but unlike the Mon Concession, it can also be used to take the capital region of a substate. This is relevant because it just so happens that 2 of China's substates, Xinjiang and Mongolia, both own capital regions with 8 provinces each. With a cost of just 5 infamy to conquer 8 provinces, these regions are among the most infamy-efficient conquests in the game in terms of number of provinces. The problem is that the only way to get them is over the dead bodies of literally hundreds of thousands of Chinese soldiers, so it wasn't until now that I felt confident that my army size and military technology were sufficiently developed to pull this off. To make things even easier for me, I opted to sacrifice a small bit of infamy on a humiliate war goal against China's ally Dainan, so that I didn't have to declare war on China directly, and thus wouldn't have to also fight their substates. What then followed was a lengthy and gruesome ordeal as I gradually slaughtered almost the entire Chinese military, before I finally had enough breathing room to actually occupy them. Unfortunately, despite having infamy to spare, I could only enforce one war goal, specifically the one on Mongolia, since the war score cost of both Mongolia and Xinjiang would have exceeded 100. But then the game threw me a bone, as the sheer devastation inflicted by me upon the Chinese Empire soon sparked the Boxer Rebellion, which consequently led to all the Chinese substates breaking free. This offered me the opportunity to go attack them individually, and more importantly, allow me to use the established Protectorate war goal to annex most of them through one war each. After all, getting one state with 8 provinces for 5 infamy is nice and all, but getting 4 states with a total of 19 provinces for 10 infamy is even better, which is exactly what I got when I annexed Yunnan. When that was said and done, I was in possession of exactly 98 landlocked provinces, just one short of the goal. In order to wrap things up neatly, I opted to declare one final war on Bukhara, who conveniently happened to own a state containing just one single province. That way I could complete the run with the exact 99 provinces required. No more, no less. So, this was a pretty fun challenge actually, trying to fit achievements designed for one game into the mold of another, and finding ways to make it work. My Switzerlake may not be the prettiest, but it does fulfill the requirements of the achievement by the same standards that would apply had I done it in the original EU4. You may expect to see more of this type of challenge in the future, as I suppose I'm looking to ever so slightly branch out from my earlier speedrunning exclusive content. Anyway, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. If you wish to see the full run, I'll have it linked in the description. That's all for now, so have a pleasant time of day.